Hello friends, this is Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming and welcome to another Last Epoch video. Today's video I'm going to go over my Shatter Strike Spellblade, and this is actually the first character I've made since I've been playing Last Epoch where I kind of didn't look into anything, kind of just theory crafted everything myself, and came up with a build that I think works pretty well. The reason I decided to choose Shatter Strike is because it actually has really crazy scaling, and I'll talk about that. I'm currently level 76. I don't have by any means perfect gear, anywhere near min-maxed gear. I'm using boots that aren't particularly well suited for the build. A lot of my gear is kind of like haphazard, and yeah, it's just not that well put together just yet. But I think it is going to be a very, very, very powerful build, and I can't wait to finish capping it off. Why'd I do it now at level 76? Well, I think at level 76, it hits its point where it's like you're really in the build. You've got all of the essentials at level 76, and I'll explain why when I get into the passive tree, but I think it's like the perfect starting point where it's not min-maxed. I'm not going to get into like the high tier level 100 corrupted stuff yet, empowered whatever monoliths, but this is where the build kind of really starts. You can start playing Shatter Strike, right away as soon as you hit like level 23. And the main reason I chose it is actually because of the scaling. If you look at any skill and you hover over it and you press Alt, you get to see the scaling. And the interesting thing about Shatter Strike is it has, like most of the abilities, it does have attribute scaling. It actually has attribute scaling for two different attributes, and the more interesting one is the dexterity, because not only does it give you 4% damage per point of dexterity, that's melee damage as well, meaning it's generic, it'll scale like the physical damage off of your weapons, but it also gives you one flat cold melee damage per point. Currently, I have 54 dexterity, and a tier 5 crafted melee cold damage goes up to 26. So I have more than 2 tier 5 cold damage stacks from the weapons. Not only that, but the particular weapon, the crystal sword, is basically handmade for this weapon, giving increased melee elemental damage and increased elemental melee attack speed as an implicit. So you're getting amazing stats for the weapon for free. On top of that, there's some additional scaling within the skill itself, which is that you get up to 240% crit multi just for having two swords equipped. And considering crystal swords are the best item you can have on this character, it's very easy to get that. So you get 120% with 4 points in this per equipped sword. You also have additional more multipliers. Here's a 60% more multiplier here. You get cold penetration, which is also basically a more multiplier. You get 30% more multiplier from breath of cold. And then you also get whiteout. I took 1 point because I couldn't sustain 2 points in whiteout and decided to go with the cold penetration. But this is actually kind of a more multiplier as well because it lets you recast your Shatter Strike. So every time I press it, it'll hit twice. And you can continue to move while it's casting, as you can see. And you can actually continue to go with Shatter Strikes while it's doing that as well. And then I have Monastrike to regain my mana when I quickly burn through all of my mana like that. So you actually get like 6 more multipliers, an insane amount of crit damage or crit multi. And unfortunately, the one thing it doesn't have is any kind of implicit melee critical strike chance, so you do have to get those on your swords. Currently, I have 70% melee critical strike chance, plus I have 267 plus another 17 from this, and then another 240%. So I'm rocking like something like 530 or so crit multi as well. So really, really huge. And as you can see, the hits are very fast and very high. And so far, I have not min-maxed this build to any extent. I do have tier 5 rolls of dexterity on both of my rings. I do have a tier 6 roll of dexterity with Shatter Strike, which at level 77 I'll be able to attempt to craft as a +2 to Shatter Strike, which will give me a little bit more damage and more area as well for better clear. I do have a tier 5 roll on my helmet, and I do not have boots, and I only have a tier 4 roll on my gloves. So I'm missing some stuff, but I'm slowly kind of getting everything put together. And I do, once I have some more monolith passives, like currently the blessings I have are increased experience, amulet drop rate. These aren't important, but I do have crit strike chance from this one and cold damage from this one, which I got from the Black Sun for the crit strike chance, which goes up to 100% when you do the empowered version. So farming that's going to be vital once I get up to empowered monoliths. And then the cold damage, which I think will probably end up being what I go with in ending the storm. And that goes quite high with the empowered version as well. I'm currently on level 80 content, Fall of the Empire, working on that. Reign of Dragons has another important defensive one I can get, which is critical strike avoidance. I'm going to start building some critical strike avoidance. So yeah, it's a very interesting character. I may as well show you a monolith, and then I'll explain my passives and skills once I've completed that. But yeah, that's the basic idea behind it. And let's jump into a monolith just to show you what kind of damage we're talking. Like I said, this is not empowered, but compared to the tooltip DPS of my werebear druid, let's see, well, I guess it doesn't matter because I don't actually have, I just did I'm still pretty early on in here, so I don't have anything exciting on here, so I'll just jump right into this one. But compared to my werebear, which is doing empowered monoliths, I actually do probably twice as much damage. As in terms of damage, I won't have a problem. The main defensive stuff we have is I actually want to stack dodge. I don't have that much currently. I just kind of have resistances, but I generate a lot of ward, not only on hits, but from teleporting, from like doing a whole variety of things. So as you can see, the damage is pretty good. I have my Monastrike set up to where I can gain mana from a distance, so I don't have to be close to things. I can kind of hit things that are far away, regen my mana. But yeah, you can see I'm getting pretty crazy crits. I have a ton of cold penetration, and I'm going to get a little bit more, not too much more. I could get some on my amulet, so there's some min-maxing to be done here. But yeah, once you can just get your mana back up to full very quickly. I do need one more level in my Monastrike because I respect, so I could focus more on getting mana with it. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of times we have like in between 3 and like 800 ward. If you just sit there and attack one unit type thing, like I fought Lagan recently. If you sit there and fight one unit and just spam Shatter Strike and Monastrike over and over again, you end up getting pretty incredible amounts of things. So, I'll share my loot filter in the description if I can figure that out, but I did custom make a loot filter that has leveling, and I'll talk about leveling. So I do have 1 through 25, or 1 through 24, basically right around the point that you're going to get your mastery, your Spellblade mastery. I have a separate loot filter kind of, so I'm searching for wands, and that's because I leveled up with Elemental Nova. And what I did with that is I went straight into 5 points of spark charges. So I went Lightning Nova, spark charges, and then you can either go into overcharge or Arcana Elementorum. Either one of these will be fine. Overcharge will give you more shock, which will give you lightning pen, which is strong. This will give you more damage in area. But spark charges are crazy strong because they basically double your damage. You put these on, and they also increase your AoE because when monsters that you hit with spark charges on them die, they do damage to things around them. And then to further increase, when I was leveling, I beelined straight through Elemental Dawn, Elemental Dusk, and Elemental Midnight, which allowed you to, every time you teleport, you cast 3 Elemental Novas. You can use Elemental Nova all the way up until like, yeah, you could probably use it until like level 76 and just respec entirely once you have access to your full skill tree that you want to do and everything. But yeah. So speaking of skill tree, 76 is important because it allows you to get 25 into the base class, 22 into sorcerer, which is very important, and I'll talk about why in a second, and then 39 into spellblade. This is when you've got everything that I think is essential for the build. So you could just leave the last 5 points in knowledge of destruction for later, but you get so little crit chance that you have to get it from this and gear, unfortunately. So 25 is going to be necessary eventually, I think. But yeah, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get the scholar and then 2 points into Arcanist. You can kind of switch this around, but I think Scholar, I think you're lacking in health in this build, and being able to have extra health in the beginning is really nice, and it'll make it easier to scale later. 2 points into Arcanist for the Int, which scales pretty okay, but not as well as Dexterity. Magic Flurry is great, both for leveling, because it gives you cast speed, and then later it gives you attack speed, which is really nice. And then Knowledge of Destruction. Once you have that, I went over and I got the Elemental Affinity, which gives Elemental All Resist, as well as Elemental Damage. 1 point into Infused Weapons, so we can get Frozen Steel, which gives us a lot of damage. I haven't noticed Infused Weapon actually working. I've tried putting in and taking out points, and it doesn't seem to calculate it into my damage. So I don't know if this actually works or not. I'll have to test this. I may put more points into this later, because obviously 2 flat cold damage is very good. I do have 3 points in Arcane Warden. I actually put more points into this early because early on when you're leveling, this is actually an insane defensive boost. But you need it less later because you have a lot of other stuff to generate ward. And then I got the 5 points in Frozen Steel. Arcane Shielding is really good because you're always going to have this up. It lasts 4 seconds. And as long as you're hitting something with a melee attack every 4 seconds, it's always up. Then you get 20 ward per second when you have it up, and 10% less damage taken. You don't get a lot of less damage taken sources, so this is actually huge defensively. Then, of course, Essence Duel, which gives attack speed and ward gained on melee attack. This is huge. And this row right here is the most important. This is why we go 39. Mana Reaver, unless you get a lot of mana regen, and from my experience, the only thing I can really spare the mana regen is on the belt slot so far. You're definitely going to need Mana Reaver, because first of all, it gives flat health, which is good. We don't have a lot of health in this build yet. Later I'm going to try to get more, but currently not a lot, so the health helps. But the chance to gain mana when you use a melee attack is very important because you eat up mana insanely quick with this build. Gemini is the very first thing you should get. It gives you the ability to dual wield. Your damage will go off the charts once you start dual wielding. It's a really big difference maker. Even if you have a really bad weapon in your offhand, it's just going to be a lot of damage, but obviously you'll try to get something better. And then this one, Prismatic Blade, which is huge, gives 8 flat cold damage and 8 dexterity, which also gives 8 flat cold damage along with 4% for each of that, so 32% damage as well, melee damage. So this is a really big. Once you have all these, you can go into Sorcerer, and you can work on getting your cold damage leech and cold penetration. You can get this earlier, but you want to make sure if you do that you at least get enough points to get enchant weapon before you go get this. So that means you'll put off dual wielding for a while, but it also means you'll have access to leech. What I did instead is I used the quest item Avarice. Let's see if I actually kept it. I don't know if I actually kept it or not. Yeah. Okay, so you get this really early on. It gives you elemental damage leached as health and some elemental resistance and leech rate. I used these for a really, really long time. In fact, I used these probably up until like level 72 or 73. So you can just use these. Otherwise, you can get the leech from here. There's not a lot of sources of leech besides the lack of crit chance. That's pretty much the only place where this is lacking. But if you decide to go the same route as I did and get these last, you'll go Mana Shell, because honestly neither of these give a lot of benefits. Mana regen could be nice, but I think just armor and mana is better. And then Wisdom, 7 points in this, 8 points in Cryomancer. You can flip-flop these a little bit. You can put less points into Cryomancer and more points into Wisdom if you so choose. I don't think there's that big of a difference. I just like having a high freeze rate multiplier because it gives me the potential to freeze rares and bosses. And then 5 points in Chill to the Bone, which is the most important point because the cold penetration and cold damage leech are both absolutely fantastic stats and I think necessary for the build. So that's that. As far as the skill specializations go, we have Shatter Strike. In the beginning, I put 5 into Icy Flow and then respect a couple of points out of it as I gained some more mana regen. Mana efficiency is really important. Even with 5 points, you'll still stay above 10. You'll have 10 mana cost, which means even when you go for Volka's Razor here, which is the next thing I'm going to be getting, which is a huge increased elemental damage with high cost melee attacks, 15 per point, so 150% damage once I get those 10 points, which will be at level 86. So even if you have all the points into this, you'll still be able to proc that. But most importantly, you want to get absolute 0 early on. 60% more damage is a lot. We're going to be getting attack speed through others to offset this. And then you want to, from there, go down, get 2 points here, and then the other free more damage multiplier, which is Breath of the Cold. And from there, you can kind of choose what to go. If you are fine with your mana, you can get a point in Whiteout. And I would actually get Cold Steel last because you're probably not going to have your crit sorted out right away. So, I mean, second from last. I would leave like the minimum 2 points in Shiver. So by like level 18, you'll want to get this. You probably want to try to get +1 and then +2 eventually to Shatter Strike. So ideally you're going to have 22 points in this, and that will put me at 5 points in Shiver. So that'll be what I kind of max out at. If you get a lot of mana regen in the build and have it min-maxed, maybe you even want to go with the second point in Whiteout instead, which should be like a 50% more damage multiplier, but will increase it's a 50% more mana multiplier as well. So unless you have some really good ways to sustain mana, I probably wouldn't recommend more than 1 point in this, but I do think 1 point is worth it. Teleport, you'll want to spec out of your leveling with all the Elemental Nova stuff, but you want to keep Elemental Affinity because you're still doing a lot of elemental damage. I do want to get Wormhole because it will decrease the cooldown of Enchant Weapon. And Enchant Weapon, as you'll see, currently has a 9-second duration and a 13.9, which goes down to a 13.3 second cooldown. So normally the base cooldown for Enchant Weapon is 15 seconds, so we take almost 2 seconds off. So without any cooldown reduction at all, I have some on my helmet, want to get more, and then I have some from Teleport here with Wormhole. And yeah, we go through Flicker and Crystalline Passage to get that, of course. But with that, it's 9 seconds up and then just 4.3 seconds down instead of 9 seconds up and 6 seconds down. Makes a big difference because Enchant Weapon is a lot of our damage. I'll kind of show you when it runs out. We go from 115 down to, so it literally over doubles our damage, which is a really, really big deal. Yeah, we can go up to 124 tooltip DPS here. And then I just get Ether Barrier and Stable Bubble. Might be worth putting a point into out of mind if you have a lot of intelligence. In fact, I think I have enough points. I should spec 1 point out of Ether Barrier and into Out of Mind because I do have 18 intelligence. So I would get more ward generation through that. So I just identified a little optimization there. Flame Ward, this is a big one. The first thing you should get is you should go up through Stalwart Defense and then 1 point in Desperate Defense and put it in Astonish. This is going to help your survivability because it automatically casts Flame Ward when you're stunned, which basically automates it. It's really important. Saved me a lot in the campaign. I did die once or twice leveling this character. I mean, total, all up to this point. But this saved me more times than I can imagine. Just a lot of times. Other than that, I get Barrier, Prismatic Buffer, Dilation, all 3 points to increase the duration and reduce the mana cost. Also Energizer and Recollection to really increase, while this is active, our ward generation. So when we do get stunned, the ward will decay much less quickly, plus it'll actually tick up instead of going down. So if I use it right now, I instantly go up to like 400 and something. And if I'm teleporting too, that'll give me even more ward retention. So this is really, really big. So Flame Ward is, excellent way to have a nice amount of ward and defense. Then we have probably the second most, one of the most important things with this build. So passively, just by having this on your bar, you get 15% more damage. So watch, if I take this off my bar, I just lose a lot of damage. I went from 52,000 to 46,000. Put this back on, goes back up to 52. Then when the cooldown comes off, I'll go up to the much larger number. So just passively having this, it's another more multiplier. There's already so many more multipliers on this. On top of that, we have it recasting automatically with Kindling Blade. You can actually use a bug by binding your key binding to your number, like your numlock keys, and then holding it down and then turning numlock off, and it'll auto-cast it. But I'd rather just have it done this way instead, because then I don't have to reset it up every time I play. You want points in concentration to have the active duration, but you just put 2 in at first and then 2 into efficacy as well, and then get Kindling Blade from there, and then you fill in the points of concentration and efficacy because they are perhaps the most important things. So your first 9 points should be all the way down here, and then you also want to get 2 points into Shivering Blade and then 5 points into Frostbrand, and then finally you can get Frozen Sparks, which will give you additional cold and lightning damage with melee attacks for each 10 physical damage that's on your weapon. We have 80 since we're dual wielding 240 attacks, so we're getting an extra 16 flat damage from this point, which is pretty nice. And then this will actually give us increased elemental damage with melee attacks proportional to how much mana you're missing when an enchant weapon is activated. So if we time it so that here, I'll try to time it here, but basically the way it's going to work is if we time it so that we're low mana when this activates, so I start attacking right before the cooldown, then we're going to get a pretty decent sized damage increase for the duration of enchant weapon. So there's some cool stuff we can do with that. And then finally, for my last couple points, I put them into Celerity because more attack speed is always good. So finally, we have Monastrike. Monastrike I've optimized for 2 things. First is making it so that it's ranged. I gain less mana back, but I can use it from anywhere and hit like little things off to the side and kind of kite things around. The main reason for this is when you're fighting bosses, they'll have like big bubbles. I'll do all of my burst damage. I'll see that a big attack is coming. I'll teleport away, and I'll just regain my mana by spamming Monastrike on them until their AoE attack is gone, and then I'll teleport back and I'll start fighting them again. So that's kind of the thought process between getting that. And then I kind of go through here, travel through here, gives me a little bit higher area but that's not that important. What is important is Monastrike grants you more mana, which you also get here. So Arcanist Blade. In fact, you probably want to grab Arcanist Blade before you travel down here. And then you get Mana Drain. And then finally, Critical Mana. So, and my last point, it will probably also go to Critical Mana. Yeah, because there's no reason to get any of these points. And I don't really want a cooldown, even if I double my mana gained. I want to be able to spam it. Because as you can see, we have a pretty high rate of attack. We can get a lot of mana back really quick. So that's the skills. As far as gear, you definitely want crystal swords. Crystal swords, as I said earlier, are absurd. You want the flat percent melee critical strike chance on them. And then other than that, ideally, I put on one of them flat cold melee, but I'll probably later on, when I get a little bit more dexterity, maybe around like 70 or so, which will be close to the cap of where I'm going to get. Maybe I can get up to like 100 if I really min-max with like tier 7 gear or something. But yeah, 70 is a pretty realistic one to get. Once I get that, then I might change this out for critical strike chance so I can hit 100% chance to critical hit, since I'll make up for the flat damage. And so I'll have that. And then dodge rating, you can actually get dodge rating, and armor shred would be the other two things. So ideally, once you have max dexterity, I would recommend percent melee critical strike chance, just critical strike chance increased, armor shred on hit, and dodge rating. And eventually I'm going to be scaling a lot of dodge. Currently I'm not, but I think for the end game that's what you want to go with. So you'll have two of these, preferably with much higher implicit rolls, like this can roll up to 160 elemental damage and 16 attack speed. So if you're looking for perfect gear, that's the way to go. Probably not too realistic. For your body armor, you want dex, which I think tier 5 rolls roll up to like 12 maybe on body armors. And then you'll want Shatter Strike, and then you want defensive stuff. So like dodge rating and void resist is what I have here because that's what I needed. But, you know, whatever you need at the time. Helmet, dex goes up to 8. You can get 8 dex on rings, gloves, boots, and helmet. You'll want 8 on each of those. I haven't quite succeeded in that. I'm missing like 12 dex or something at the moment. But you can get it on all those. Cooldown recovery speed, unfortunately it fractured when I was trying to craft up to tier 5 on that, but that happens. There's a lot of good helmet bases. There's one that gives critical strike chance. This one gives ward retention. Silver Crown, which is pretty nice. I think Golden Crown actually gives more ward retention, or gives up to a higher amount. So there's a lot of good bases for that. The Umbral Coat is pretty good. There's actually a lot of really good bases too for this particular build. I have some here, like freeze rate multiplier is really good. This Battle Mage Robes has very high armor and ward retention, so this could be very good. The spell damage is useless. Mana is not that great. Adaptive spell damage is useless. So yeah, kind of pay attention to your implicits, but you can get up to 25% on the Umbral Coat, which is really nice. And then I'm using a silver amulet for the crit chance. I'm using crit multi and resist. Honestly, this isn't that good, and I don't think mana regeneration on this slot is that great, but I do have it on my belt and amulet at the moment, and I think that's it. As far as belts go, you want mana regen cold damage. I have physical damage, so that's not really helping me that much. And then percent dodge rating. There's some stuff you want. You actually want crit avoidance, but I need on your rings here, but I needed the resistances, so unfortunately I have some pretty bad rings and I'll be messing around with those. Lots of good bases for rings as well. There's the necrotic resistance ward retention one. There's critical strike chance. There's vitality health regen, which gives you health. Like, there's all sorts of great ring bases for this build, so that's something. Then we have the Solarum Bracers, which give increased critical strike chance. You can get melee attack speed if you want on this, but that'll just run you out of mana, so I don't think it's that necessary. It will also increase your DPS and will increase the rate at which you regain your mana with Monastrike, so it's kind of up to you instead of intelligence, so like dex and melee attack speed is fine. And then crit multi on preferably a scrying eye in your relics slot, because you can get up to 24% crit multi, and it doesn't show up on your tooltip unfortunately, but I did test it. It does seem to work. It does seem to add damage, so that's really nice. And then like kind of on your belt, instead of having resistances, preferably you want to get resistances elsewhere. You're going to want some like flat health percentage hybrids. Probably want that on your boots too. I definitely need a lot more health, because health also increases your endurance threshold, and probably some endurance to help against one-shot protection and give me a chance to leech against really high damage stuff. But I'll kind of, yeah, right now I've kind of hobbled together all of my gear. As far as idols go, you want the 2 of the ornate glass idols, and you want the elemental melee damage, and then either mana spent gained as ward, or preferably you can get up to 4 melee cold damage. So I would actually prefer 2 of these, because I have other ways to gain ward that so the mana spent gained as ward isn't super great, even though we do burn through a lot of our mana very quickly. Preferably, ideally, you would have like 70% melee elemental damage and 4 melee cold damage on each of these, and the rest should pretty much be like just resistances. You want a lot of resistances. Stuff with a flat dodge, like this is really good. High flat dodge and some resistance. And stun avoidance isn't that great. Yeah, I don't have that many good small idols just yet, but word retention is nice. Dodge rating is nice. Healing effectiveness isn't that useful. I'll be replacing that. And then if you do want to use these 2-slot idols like I do in these 2 slots, percent increased health is really good, and crit chance is really good. So both of these are kind of examples of what you would want, and then plus a resistance. So I have my idols pretty much where I want them. I just don't have that good of ones at the moment. I'll hope to be able to use them and to kind of fix my resistances a little better, because currently, for instance, I have a lot of the elemental resistances. I can take these out and basically still be maxed. So need to min-max those a little bit more in order to max out my other resistances, so I can focus on better stats like crit avoidance and endurance on my other gear, and health. So that's pretty much my plan. This was a really long video, but it's a really fun build. I would highly recommend it. I hope you enjoyed. This has been Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye.